Hello everybody, it is Obscure Nick today here with a new video, and today we are going to review the book Things I Should Have Said by Jamie Lynn Spears. I read it for free so you don't have to, so let's deep dive and thrive. Okay, so as you guys may or may not know, Jamie Lynn Spears, Britney Spears' little sis, released her memoir, Things I Should Have Said, in the height of the Free Britney movement. This book, this is the description of the book. This book is about how the world first met Jamie Lynn Spears as a child star and as Britney's sister, younger little sister. She played different characters on All That and Zoey 101, but as she grew up, she faced teen pregnancy, raised her daughter on her own, pursued a career, and learned to stand on her own 2 feet. The real Jamie Lynn started to take center, a raw, blemished, and imperfect woman standing in her power. In Things I Should Have Said, she talks frankly about the highs and lows and sharing what it was like traveling the world as a kid, probably on Britney's tours, how she moved into acting and performing herself, what life as a child star took from her, and the life-changing reality of becoming a teen mom. She talks about how she finally found love and how mistakes she has made that have taught her more than anything else. She also shares vulnerability about how the ATV accident that nearly took her daughter's life brought her back to her faith and caused her to reevaluate and redirect her life. Yeah, that's the description. Wow, she really made it sound like she's Anna Green Gables or something. That's what that description was giving me personally. And so, yeah, we'll see if that's what it really is. We're gonna review this in a classy yet honest manner. So we're gonna put in class but a little bit of truth, so buckle down. For me, this is a PR move, clearly, and we're gonna get into why I think that is. And the book of the majority throughout is just her about her feelings about Britney's situations, and throughout she talks about herself, but then she mentions something that is happening with Britney at the same time and how she feels embarrassed by her. So pretty much she says that she's embarrassed by her sister and everything she's done. That's what it's coming for me, and everything that was going on in her personal life, and no sympathy or empathy whatsoever. So we're gonna look at passages from the book that stood out to me personally, one by one here, because I read the full book, actually, and I just took what stood out to me, and it gets kind of repetitive, in my opinion, with her saying something about Britney and being embarrassed by it. That's what the pattern pretty much is. But starting with page 10, my parents would always expect me to do as I was told. At first that didn't seem unusual in the parent-child dynamic, but I was taught to defer to Britney or behave in a way that made things easier for her. Mama said stuff like, "Come on, Jamie Lynn, we don't want to upset your sister." It could be something as simple as, "Let Britney do that first," or, "If it's good for your sister, it's good for all of us." What complicated things even more was that Mama reveled in the attention that came with being Britney's mother. People were more interested in who she was than ever before, and I think she loved that part of it. So in this, pretty much in this page, Lynn is a bad parent and is a stage mom who loves the attention she gets from just being Britney's mother, and she pretty much ignored her other children. On page 12, Mama always cared more about Daddy's feelings than doing the right thing. It's funny that Jamie Lynn is talking about generational curses and breaking them, yet she's repeating them by caring about what her father thinks more than her sister. And that's what it seems to come off just from the promotion itself, that she cares more about what her father thinks rather than standing up for her sister, because obviously she's been clearly silent for way too long. This next, in page 16, she says, "Singing was the only part of what I loved about performing. My sister's voice was throaty and strong, while mine was fluid and control. People said we were different but equally as talented, but my true love was acting. Why would you say, like, throaty? Like, what does that even mean? Because to me that comes off as, like, it's clogged or something. Like, that's what it came off to me. So I don't know what you mean by that, because to me this just sounds like you feel like you are just as talented as her, which your sister is a performer in general. Singing isn't the only thing to performing. You have to command a whole stage. She does, like, choreography and these huge phenomenal stage shows with huge budgets, and she does it, and she comes up with the moves herself. Like, there's a whole other layer to her performing rather than just your country singing itself. Equally as talented, that's a question mark. I would love to see what other talents you have, Jamie Lynn, because I'm really curious. As for the acting, that could use a lot of work, in my opinion, just from what I've seen with her acting. But if there's other projects out there that show that she can do versatile acting, I'd love to see that. I think so much energy was directed to keep my sister's career moving that my parents neglected to pay attention to each other. Mama's anger and disappointment escalated as demands on her time increased. And then also there was another thing on page 17 where she said Britney's fame changed all that. And that their dad didn't live with them anymore as much, and he was distancing himself. And this next page, page 21, All That had a summer-long shoot. When we started shooting, Mom and I flew out to California with my dog Izzy and stayed in the home Britney shared with Justin Timberlake in Hollywood. Okay, so you guys were living off Britney's money, pretty much. That's what page 21 gave to me. Days on the all set were fun, but the experience was served as a master class in comedy. Oddly enough, when I arrived on set for the first week, I was shy, almost intimidated. The reality of performing on a national broadcasted show was settling in. For my first appearance, my one job was to come down a slide dressed as an elf and giggle. The director said action, and I froze, and I couldn't do it. Mama stood at the side stage and gave me a look that said, "After all of that work you did to get here, now this?" To me, that just says to me, Lynn is a stage mom. She only cared about money. I feel like most parents would be comforting and nurturing towards a child if they screwed up on an audition. I get that there's lots of pressure on it already, but to get mad at your child and be upset with them for them having stage fright for something that they are clearly not meant to do, maybe, is sad. It shows that she's the type of stage mom that wants to win at everything. She only cares about money, and that's what it says here. And I felt, personally, Jamie Lynn's appearances on All That, when she joined, she was the least animated character out of every cast member there, where every cast member seemed to have natural comedy, even within that cast itself. Season 7 and 8 and 9 of All That were not the best. Like, it wasn't as good as the original, but it still had promising cast members like Lisa Foyles, like Giovanni Samuels, like Jack DeSena, Chelsea Brummett, Brian Hearns, and even Tracy Brown said that Jamie Lynn just wasn't able to be as crazy and as animated as the rest of them. And it definitely showed. If she felt very out of place, all I felt for her was that she could do cheerleading, and she did that Thelma Stump character. And I remember Trash and Fashion. That's all I remember of her. I don't really remember much. I haven't seen that season of All That in years because that has not been on TV for the longest time. Part is the Zoey 101 stuff, which we're going to get into the Zoey 101 stuff with Alexa Nicholas in this book in another video, because I have a whole other thing on that, and I have a whole other thing to talk about. That's a whole other situation. As well, the Zoey 101 reboot, we need to talk about what that was really going to be about, because that's a whole story in itself too. And and that's a whole other video as well. So we'll do that some other time. But this was the end of the Zoey 101 part on page 47. I love that multiple generations of family have enjoyed the series. This is about Zoey 101. Oddly enough, my older daughter Maddie had very little interest in seeing me on screen, and my younger daughter Ivy is too young to watch it. I think it's interesting that Jamie Lynn's daughters have no interest in it, yet of watching her mom perform, even though Jamie Lynn was trying to put her daughter in this, apparently, and into the Zoey 101 reboot, even though she has no little interest. To me, that just screams, that's her repeating a generational pattern with her mom who pushed her into show business, pretty much. That's what it was. That's what, to me, that's what that's saying to me there, in my opinion. This next part was page 71. This was around the time Britney was managed by Sam Lufty, and he said a few things on Twitter. And this was in 2007, I believe. I spent most of my time in my LA apartment I shared with Mama, but when I wanted space and quality time with my sister, I went to Britney's house. I'd go there all the time, simply to enjoy the space and beauty of the area. So she only went there to just lounge in it, pretty much, as a getaway, instead of, because her place was a small apartment and she just wanted to use Britney's space as a place, spa, as like a treatment, I guess. Which is like, okay, you're using your sister's money and stuff and her house and everything, and not using your own space. So there's like no boundaries here. And Sam Lufty has said on Twitter that Britney saw Jamie Lynn and Lynn a total of 10 times in 2007, and that Jamie Lynn did not like going to Britney's place because she didn't want to deal with her behavior at that time, even though I feel like Jamie Lynn and Lynn were part of the problem, because Britney wanted to get away from all that because it was too much, because they demanded too much and put too much pressure on her with performing and everything. And I think that's why Britney took time out in 2000 in the Zone era to really just zone out, you know? Because I feel she needed that. So this next part is about her pregnancy, pretty much. And first off, she calls in this book Casey Aldridge, the father of her first daughter, Maddie, Casper. And I'm like very skeptical on this. I found it very odd. Like, I don't know if it's just because it's too painful to talk about her full name, his full name, because, you know, it's an ex thing. I've been there before. I don't really like talking about exes in full name. Or if she's lying about something specific and exaggerating the truth in this book and doesn't want to be sued for defamation, because there might be lies about him in this book too, and what she's saying in this book about him, there's a lot of brutal things she says about him, in my opinion, that we don't know fully if it's the truth. I do, however, know that he has had legal action in recent years, so that's very true. So I think there is some trouble with Casey Aldridge, but I don't know if it's exaggerated. When she first found out she's pregnant, as the shock wore off, my synapses were firing and I felt dizzy. This is on page 75 of the book. What to do first? Who to tell? I went to the obvious choice, which was to call Casper, who is Casey, on the phone and tell him. He didn't believe me. He thought it was a ploy. I said, a ploy for what? He insinuated I slept around, and even if I was pregnant, maybe the baby wasn't his. He was the only person I ever had been intimate with. Still, Casper wasn't convinced. So I find it interesting that he didn't believe her, and he thought she was sleeping with someone else, which I wonder what made him think that exactly, because there is that blind item that came out on September 12th, 2007, with NT Lawyer saying that there was a producer who impregnated a teen star, and they were signing up fake boyfriends or trying to find fake boyfriends to cover this up and having them sign NDAs. And as well, she admits in this book that Jamie Lynn's team was trying to get him to sign an NDAs and stuff. And I wonder why they're signing NDAs exactly, because, you know, sometimes we think it's just not to leak things to the press, even though in this family it seems this family seems to be besties with TMZ, as we've learned. So, I wonder what else there is with those NDAs. I wonder what the truth really is here. Now, I'm gonna say Sam Lufty said it's absolutely impossible for Jamie Lynn's baby to be the child of DS's, even though we've made those connections. I'm not entirely sure on that. I'm very in the middle on that, just to be perfectly honest, and I still am, even after all that. And I would like to have some further discussions on that. I also think, like, something I will say here that I think the media is wrong for doing is calling her the S word, because I don't think anyone should shame someone for being pregnant, especially when they're a minor, and I think that's kind of sick. And I think there's other proactive discussions that could be had, and I will say the media was cruel with her back then in a lot of ways. So I do sympathize with her on that a little bit, because that is not okay to be saying the S word so openly about a minor, and adults saying that is kind of weird. I also don't think I think people should stop phrasing that her daughter was a mistake to her career, because in this book, Jamie Lynn does say that that's not true, and that she loves her daughter so much. So that I'm gonna have to give to her is that I think that, you know, I don't feel like anyone should make her daughter feel that way either. And to make her feel like that her mother's career was canceled because of her. I remember on the Tyra Banks show, there was this like 15-year-old who wanted to be pregnant because Jamie Lynn Spears was pregnant, which made matters worse for her, in my opinion. But yeah, the media was cruel back then, a lot. And we need to learn from that, and we need to do better at reporting this stuff, and that's why I'm trying to give her an honest review in the classiest way possible, even though there's lots of brutally honest. Here, I'm not gonna shame someone for being pregnant. I'm not doing that here. On page 81, discussions continued, and everyone's certain that termination would be the best course of action. I will never forget when Miss Lou stood up for me and said, "Y'all can't force her to abort the baby." She was the first and only person on my team to show any support for my desire to keep my baby. And that's very interesting. This part of the book where she's talking about Lou M. Taylor, Brittany's former business manager, but also part of Jamie Lynn's team, how Lou M. Taylor helped her with financial management and stuff like that and wanted her to keep the baby, and was very defensive and nice about her throughout this book. And we're gonna get into why I think she's really nice about Lou at the end here, because I feel like this book was not all Jamie Lynn's idea, in my opinion. I think there's more to it here of what's going on. The book goes into how she escaped and how Casey was disappearing from her life and as her daughter's life, and that it wasn't working between the two. Page 82, contracts were drafted in non-disclosures signed by Casper and anyone who might try to benefit from releasing the story. The next part is about Lynn's book, Through the Storm. A real story of fame and family in a tabloid world. Still to this day, I've not read that book because I saw firsthand the difficulties that Mama and Brittany suffered after my sister read it, and I wanted to avoid the possible outrage reading her words would evoke. It's very interesting that she doesn't want to read someone's tell-all, yet she's writing a tell-all that has a lot of strong words in it, in my opinion. Page 106, about how Casey would sponge off her Zoey money, I guess. I allowed him to sponge off my hard-earned money, manipulate my feelings, and tear down my confidence. Yet, you also kind of did the same thing to Brittany when you were staying in her summer home, when you were filming All That, and you were so ashamed of her that you dyed your hair like Christina, apparently according to your sister, and all your friends would do it in order to mock her. And you kept saying how you were so embarrassed by her when she shaved her head, and that you were only worried about yourself and not what your sister was feeling. Narcissistic behavior here. She met Jamie Watson, who was a businessman and didn't know much about only knew about Jamie Lynn Spears because of her last name. She knew about her sister, of course, and eventually marrying him. Jamie Watson is a bit guilty as well, allegedly, for moving around Britney's money as well. That's why he's always going on Instagram and being defensive about his case and his wife's case, and it's very interesting that he keeps responding, because I feel that's just putting him in worse light, just in my opinion. And I would say, Jamie Lynn, you should have a talk with your husband to not message random people online like that, because that is just making things more suspicious and making your case much worse, and everyone who is Team Con, much worse. As well, she's talked about how she went to go start her country music career in Nashville in 2011 and then released her EP in 2014. I remember the press releases for that. I didn't know if they were true at the time, but when she came out with the country music a few years later, I was like, oh, okay. Britney didn't reach out for helping with the issues reach out for help dealing with the issues she was facing, and it seemed that almost everyone on the team was more interested in keeping the money coming in than getting her the help she needed. What help exactly? Like, what help? Because I don't think anyone on the team was trying to help her, truthfully. My sister didn't seem well, and those closest to her at the time, especially my parents, believed the conservatorship was the best way to protect her and the fortune she had amassed throughout her career. I think their only intent was to keep her safe at a time when she couldn't do it herself. My father, Jamie, who wasn't a stranger to difficulties, worked with the lawyers and the court to develop a trust that would serve Britney's best interest. So she's defending Jamie, that's number one there on this, and think that her parents had her best interest, even though there was a lot of things your sister said that didn't seem very trustworthy and seemed very abusive from the testimony last year. And again, you said in GMA that you didn't want to make judgment calls on her behavior, yet you're making it right here. Okay. Something else she goes on about in the book that I do feel bad is where her daughter got into an ATV accident in 2017. And I mean, that was not a good idea to begin with, to be having your daughter on an ATV, but I know kids will be kids. And I will say I live in a southern type of area as well, where it's very free roam, especially when you're out in the country. Kids can ride tractors and everything. That's happened. That's a very southern country thing, and people in my province have done similar things to it. It's very roam free. But after the ATV accident and her daughter lived, Jamie Lynn decided to convert to Catholicism. And again, no judgment there. I am Catholic myself. But I found it very interesting that I thought she was already Catholic before, but as for the testimony chapter, it's very clear that she did not hear anything Britney said, because in this chapter, it's all about how Britney said what she had to say, but she didn't respond to anything she said. She just then continued into her and said she got death threats, and how Britney did not once lift her veil to point at who's really responsible, so she took all the death threats in and her family. But Jamie Lynn, in that testimony, she pointed fingers at your dad, first of all. She also pointed in multiple Instagram posts about Lou, Lynn, Robin, Sam Ingham. So she did point fingers, and she did say family. So with family, that means everyone, and including you, and you're getting called out now to knowing what part you played in this. And then she also decided to conveniently place in this a random story about how her and her sister got into a heated argument during COVID in front of her kids. And again, no details in this story about why they got into a heated argument. I would love to know why. It's very in between maybe type of thing. It's very on the fence. There's no details, because like I want to know what were these fights about then? Like, what were they about? And she put her sister in bad light once again and said that her daughter had to mediate the fight. And this seems to be the theme throughout the book, and it seems to be just continuing on and on and on. And that's pretty much how the book ends. I think what this book revealed to us, truthfully, shows that Jamie Lynn is jealous and self-centered and thinks the world revolves around her. That's what I got out of it, because especially that chapter on the testimony, like Brittany said her testimony, but you don't have any response to what she said. I get it's her memoir, and I do think she has a right to tell her story, but she did not show 1 cent of sympathy towards her sister's situation, even though there's hints of her showing sympathy towards everyone else. Like Lynn, like Jamie, I saw that throughout, but not once to her sister. I didn't get any of that in that book. Where is that? Like, it seems like that's how I know she's jealous and narcissistic and all those things, is because there was no connection there with that. I think she also needs to just admit it, and she needs to understand it's natural to feel that way because of her position, and I get that layer of sensitivity there. And I think that's what's hurting her most from what I'm getting her here. And we learn that this is not a fair, she's not in a fair position as a sibling in a family that does not have a fair and balanced dynamic when she was growing up, because her parents had to give all that attention to Brittany for her career. And to be fair though, Brittany was used as an object, and that's what it sounds like to me, because Brittany even said she never got made milkshakes at home, but Jamie Lynn did. So Brittany sacrificed her childhood to be in this center stage, whereas Jamie Lynn, that was kind of just more of an add-on, and they only paid attention to her when there was money to be made, and that's very clear here in this book. And that's why Brittany called her a brat and wanted to slap her, is because she got made milkshakes. She got to have a childhood to some degree. She got to lounge in her mother's home, whereas when she grew up, she didn't have any of that because she just had to work. And that was her childhood pretty much. And Jamie Lynn can't even make that connection. I think what she should have truthfully done with this book is she should have made it a teen parenting book about raising a kid as a teen, because that's where I think the most truth lies within the stories that she's shared. And I think that would have been a more proactive message with that book, and I think those were the most interesting parts, to be honest, because the stuff about Brittany shading her, we did not need that. I feel you just added a bad light. It looks like a bad marketing ploy to make your sister look bad in some way and to make her look crazy and ill. I think as well, this book was to make her look crazy and ill, because this book was written, let's not forget, when the conservatorship was still in place, and they thought this was going to go on forever and that it would never end. So it shows how out of date it is for her to just be talking about Brittany's illness. Like, what illness? It has not been defined in any sort of court or law. Like, where is it? Like, if you think there's an illness, what is it then? Again, as for the Zoey stuff, we're gonna deal with that in another video, part 2 of what I really think happened with Zoey 101. I do think Jamie Lynn does not have a clear sense of reality, truthfully, and it's very out of touch. And releasing this in the height of the Free Britney movement and justice for Britney, all the legal action going on was a good idea because she thought it would clear her name. This was not it at all. This was just not it. This made certain people in her family and around her more guilty. And I want to bring up this document that I'm showing with you guys over here. Jamie Lynn, is this your signature? Because you said you had no involvement in that conservatorship and you had no idea of it. Then why is your signature here in a signed court document? If this is not your signature, then it's either someone around you that signed it for you and they're framing you, and I recommend you take legal action against them, against this individual, because if this is not your signature, then they signed your name illegally on this court document. That's why I'm not really sure why she said she has no involvement in this conservatorship when she has the signed document right here with her signature on it. Truthfully, I do think this book was released to make light of certain people, aka Lou Taylor, who is publicly being grilled, and so the heat can all be on Jamie Lynn and Jamie, but avoid these certain people who have court dates coming up with their business, TriStar Entertainment, Lou Taylor, and they're being put in good light here, and they're being it's very put under the rug. Yet Jamie Lynn keeps mentioning that her team controlled everything. Isn't Lou M. Taylor part of your team? Like, isn't she part of your team? It seems like she has a lot of control here, in my opinion. So, and I think that's why this book was released now, and I think from her advice, this was her advice allegedly to release this book now, because it's a distracting mechanism for a certain reason, and we all know that. So let's keep our energy high up with this. I truthfully think this book should have been released years later if this was truly genuine, when Britney isn't as in the public eye as now, because this looks like a quick cash grab, truthfully. And it would have been better as a parenting book, like I said. And I think Jamie Lynn truthfully needs new business and PR people around her, because this annihilates her, and this is her putting her reputation on the line and destroying her own reputation, which I do think she'll regret later. I'm glad she backed out of a book tour, because that wouldn't have worked. That truthfully would have backfired even further. And as of today, Matthew Rosengart sent a cease and desist letter to Jamie Lynn Spears to stop making false claims about Britney, and for her to stop talking about Britney as of today, otherwise legal action will be taken further. Britney called her a brat on Instagram, and Jamie Lynn and her friends dyed their hair like Christina Aguilera to make Britney upset, in Britney's words. And Britney and Jamie Lynn have been going back and forth in Instagram posts lately, so it's been really crazy overall. It's again a very sad situation between two sisters, and I think their sisterhood has been indefinitely broken and breached. And you know, we'll see where this story continues. We're gonna talk about this a little more. This book was really not it for now. I don't think this should have been released like right now at all. This book really wasn't it. But I do feel it's a smear campaign for Britney, truthfully. I think that definitely is it. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Much love to you all, and bye!